One of them wanted to be the security guy. He claimed he was a security guy.
Welcome to a political version of Security Guy Ready with my host, Miss Tanya. How are you?
Hi, I'm well. How are you?
Now you're a professional. This is your second show.
This is so exciting. I'm thrilled to be here.
I must say you did very well in your first show. Very well.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Did you have a lot of
appreciate
fun?
it. I really did. Yeah, your guests are amazing. They're really interesting,
Yeah,
and intriguing people.
We
Yeah,
try
it's
to break it down to real people that do the work,
a good show here.
right? Because the people that say they're talking heads and the experts, it doesn't come across the same as the guy that's actually doing the work.
Yeah.
And that's why whenever anybody running for political office calls me up, I say, come on down. I have
Absolutely.
no political affiliations. I've never registered on either side of the party. I vote completely independently every time I vote. And I'm always welcoming people with bright ideas to come in and help make the system better. And to that point, I want to welcome my guest today, Ms. Debra Archuleta. Now, the deputy district attorney, meaning the head district attorney, is,
Jackie Lacey.
and Debra works for Jackie, so one of the group, and she's running for judge, LA County, seat 11,
Yes.
right?
LA County Superior Court, seat number 11.
Now, what I like to do in these kind of interviews is just tell us about yourself, because that comes across as you, and that translates into how good a job you're going to do as a judge. So give us your background, how you got into be a DA and all that stuff.
Well, I got hired in 1989 in the district attorney's office. I was a law clerk on a very high-profile case. Back then, it was the Parwez case. And it was a very tragic case involving a murder of a child. And I was still in law school at the time, and it was a very grueling case to be a law clerk on and to sit through that experience. But it ignited in me the fact that I knew I wanted to be a trial lawyer. And after sitting through that case as a law clerk, up close and personal, I decided I really wanted to become a prosecutor. So in 1991, I passed the bar, and Mr. Ira Reiner hired me as a deputy district attorney, and that's how my career started in 1991, and I remain there to this day. So I'm just actually starting my 26th year as a deputy district attorney.
That's a long time in that seat. That's That's very good.
Really good at your job.
Very impressive.
Well, I've had a tremendous career in the sense that I've had a variety of areas of expertise. I started off in the gang unit. Early on, I spent about 3 or 4 years doing gang crimes, and I branched out from there. I spent the majority of my career in downtown Los Angeles at the Criminal Courts Building, and those of us in the legal world call that like legal triage. I mean, if you want to go and be a trauma surgeon, you go to County USC. Yeah. You want to do legal triage, you work in downtown Los Angeles at the Criminal Courts Building.
Very interesting. Now, the part where you said, I want to be a trial lawyer, that's not as usual in the profession. There's only not that many trial lawyers, basically, right? In criminal side.
Correct.
Right.
Well, prosecutors tend to be trial lawyers. The vast majority of civil litigators, however, negotiate and settle cases and never go to court and do trials. But I had that bug in me that I really wanted to be a trial lawyer.
What do you like about it?
I love being able to connect with juries. I love to be able to present what I believe are the facts in the case and have them see it the way that the people see it. I do represent the people of the state of California when I go into court, and I like to be able to advocate on behalf of victims, and I like, best of all, that justice will be done.
So how do DA departments measure success? One view is that it's based on how many convictions you get.
Correct.
I mean,
that's
we all
one measure.
Yeah, one. That's the standard one. We all have to have something. When I was a motor cop, it was how many tickets did you write?
Of course.
But that's a quota, and you can't really...
That hasn't changed, I don't believe.
Yeah, but you can't really have a quota because that's technically not right. But I mean, do you guys take cases that you can win? And when I say that in a good way. And here's what I mean. Facts are facts, but there's facts and damn facts and statistics, and everybody has a different version of the story. But people are guilty or not guilty. They're not guilty or innocent. Right? Those are two different things that come across. So when you get a case, do you feel good that you're going to win, not because of all the legal gyrations, but you feel some kind of connection to it ethically and morally. I don't know if I'm explaining this correctly, but
I understand exactly what you're saying.
yeah.
First of all, as a prosecutor, we have to have an ethical obligation to make sure that we do justice. And although people do talk about our win-loss ratio, and I'm actually very proud of my statistics, my obligation every day when I go into court is to make sure I do justice. And I've personally made that a mission of mine throughout my 25, now starting my 26th year as a deputy district attorney. We have an ethical obligation to make sure that justice is served, and there's checks and balances in the system. First of all, when the police bring us a report, we want to review that report carefully, and then it's the district attorney's office that makes a filing decision. Be it myself or one of my colleagues in the office, they will file the cases. There's a standard, an ethical standard that we must follow before we even file a case. Then after the case is filed, if it's a felony, it will go to a preliminary hearing where it will be heard by a magistrate. At that time, the court will hear evidence, typically from the prosecution, and the court will then make a determination whether or not they believe that there's sufficient evidence for the case to be bound over for trial. And then thereafter, we continue through the process, and then ultimately, by and large, cases are tried before juries unless they're resolved short of trial by virtue of a plea bargain.
Now, this is an important process that people forget. First of all, the police officer takes his best shot at determining whether you committed a crime. That's a discretionary call there, but it's based on the law. Then it goes through another filter. You're the first filter at the DA's office that says, you know what, I think you got the facts right, you got the police department right, the evidence is okay, let's go. The third filter is the preliminary hearing. So there's a lot. If you're going to get seated in a trial, you probably had a problem in what your behavior was, right? We're not just filing every single case that comes in the door because somebody's trying to railroad you or something. I believe in the system that way. I think it's fair.
I mean, I think that maybe we touched on this before. Isn't it sort of the defense attorney's job to prosecute? Yes, but then each plaintiff has someone representing them, and they want to plead out, do they not? Isn't that
Well, first of all, it's the prosecutor or the
Got your-
deputy district
got your things
attorney
I see.
that
I'm sorry.
prosecute. The defense attorneys defend their clients.
I'm
now,
new here.
That's all right. Approximately 93% of the cases, I believe, that the district attorney's office files never go to trial.
Really?
Meaning that they get pled out or negotiated or resolved by means short of a jury trial. And so it's the small percentage, maybe 7% of the cases that ultimately get filed that ultimately will go to a jury for their trial
Now,
consideration.
93 seems high to me, but how is justice served in that 93%?
Well, in the cases that are pled out, there will often be a offer made to the defendant pre-trial that is usually a more favorable offer to get an individual to plead out to lesser charges possibly, or there might be a striking of strikes, or if the prosecutor feels that there might be some evidentiary issues or weaknesses, there's an incentive built in to the defendant to take a better deal, if you will,
Right.
prior to the jury trial. So many times defendants find it in their best interest, along with their counsel's guidance or, prodding, that they take the deal because they'll get a better deal.
Yeah, and you hear people complain about that, saying that's not justice. I think it is. I think it might be better justice in a way sometimes if it makes a resolution that doesn't involve, pushing things farther than they should be pushed, in other words.
Well, and it also gives the defendant an opportunity to have a say in the outcome of his or her case.
Because in another case, they have no outcome, no say, except their defense.
Ultimately, if you
Yeah.
go to a jury trial and the jury finds you guilty,
Right.
you have no say in the outcome, and then the judge will, levy the appropriate sentence. But when you're a defendant sitting in the defendant's chair and you're represented by counsel, if you plea bargain, that is you do that of your own free will, and that's part of the built-in plea. When we take those pleas, they have to indicate that this is of their own free will to do that.
Now, you recently, or you still are, in the stalking unit, is that true?
Oh, no, I left the stalking
Oh.
unit several years ago. I worked in downtown for many years prosecuting violent crimes, and then I was the head of the stalking unit for 3 years. I worked very closely with the Sheriff's Department, Major Crimes. I also worked very closely with LAPD in a threat management unit. And then thereafter, I spent 7 years in Pasadena prosecuting cases up there. And then the last couple years, I was in family violence, and I'm currently assigned to White Collar Crime Division. However, I have a violent crimes caseload that I carried in from family violence, And in fact, my ballot designation will be violent crimes prosecutor.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yes. So I've tried over 110 jury trials, or at least it's approximately 110 jury trials. And the majority of my career has been spent doing cases involving domestic violence homicide, street crimes, child abuse, child molestation, sexual offenses, shaken babies, human trafficking. And then when I was the head of the stalking unit, of course, I handled several high-profile stalking cases involving celebrities and non-celebrities, a workplace of threats of violence, etc. So I've had a very rich career full of a lot of different types of cases, and I think that experience that I have is unparalleled with anybody else in my current race.
It sounds like it. 110
does.
trials is a lot of trials, I think, in that business.
Well, and especially so honed to one thing. I mean, it seems like you have so much experience when it comes to these violent crimes. And
Well, and I've advocated on behalf of women, children, people in the gay community, and the elderly. I've done cases involving elders for elder abuse, physical abuse, as well as financial abuse. And a couple of my opponents are running as gang prosecutors. And although I do believe that gang crimes are obviously a serious crime, I also believe that when the vulnerable are preyed upon, be it by stalkers or family members, or there's child abuse, domestic violence, molestation, that this actually tears at the very fabric of our society.
Absolutely. Gangs are not nice, but they're kind of a microcosm of the bigger problem of a family unit or society, right? So it's kind of an output of a bad family situation in the first place, right?
Well, and when women and children are abused, or the elderly are abused and violated, or people in the members of the gay community, this knows no race, creed, socioeconomic background, color, religious affiliation, et cetera, et cetera. And to me, this signals a decay and a moral breakdown in our community.
Yeah, and gangs aren't really that big a deal right now. Not like they used to be. Not in the 80s when I was doing it, right? So I like your ticket better because I think you have more experience on that side. It makes more sense to me.
Well,
I feel like, and maybe I'm wrong in this, but maybe there's just more of a spotlight on it, but there's so much more of it than there used to be.
So much more of what?
Domestic violence, violent crime.
Yeah, it's going up.
Children being abused. I mean,
Well, we're hearing more about it. And I believe that one of the outcomes of the O.J. Simpson case was, I think it was the first time that people finally realized on some level, whether you agree with the verdict or not, that Nicole Brown Simpson was most likely a victim of domestic violence, and this was a domestic violence homicide.
Now, tell me how a judge differs in their function from the district attorney. I don't know this seems oversimplified, but my nieces and nephews aren't the greatest arbitrators of civics, and I try to make my audience take them down to a level that everybody understands it. And I think you'd be a good judge because of that background. Is that the correct translation on my part?
Well, when you are a judge, you cannot advocate for one side or the
Right.
other. And although I've been very passionate about my career as a deputy district attorney, I realize now that I'm going to have to take off my advocate hat, and I'm going to have to sit there more as a referee, if you will.
Now, that might be hard. I'm not just saying for you, but I could see
Right.
the way you phrase it that way. Tanya, doesn't that make sense? So you're trying to get the bad guys, but now you're on the bench as a judge, and you got to be right in the middle on that one.
Well, and I absolutely have to be fair and impartial to both sides.
Yeah.
And one of the things that's been really fascinating to me during my quest to seek this position is that despite my tremendously successful record as a deputy district attorney, I also enjoy tremendous support from the defense bar because they've worked with me for over 25 years. They know that I'm honest, they know that I'm ethical, and they know that I possess a very high level of integrity. And they've been very supportive of my candidacy. And I think that speaks well for my record now personally as a deputy DA and in the future as a judge, because these are people that know me, that have worked on opposite sides of the table, if you will, and yet they would be willing to bring their clients in front of me as a judge, as the impartial arbiter of the facts.
Right. And the facts also meaning, do you stick more to the law as being the judge? Is it
Yes.
easier that way because you're just saying, listen, I'm looking at the law book. I got my crib notes here and my cheat sheet. I don't see it.
Typically my penal code, my evidence code. but
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, you're making the call on the law
Yes.
as opposed to what the facts are in that way. Does that
Correct.
make sense? Okay.
And ultimately, as most people know, when you go to trial, the juries are the ones that decide on the facts, whether they felt that the people met their burden of proof beyond a reasonable doubt. And ultimately, the judge has the sentencing power, But there's, sometimes there's mitigating factors that a judge will look at. One of the issues I believe that we're seeing more and more with the electorate is a call for reform for the criminal justice system. And you have to be able to know, and especially with my background and my experience, I know when someone needs to go to prison, and I know when someone needs to have a second chance for
Right.
redemption and rehabilitation.
So let's talk about the organization of the courts. Are they now the new DMV of our government services? It just seems things take a long time to filter through. And I don't know how much of that is policies, procedures, case management, the judge saying we're going out early. How could you make it work better in that way?
Well, our system is overburdened. We have too many cases.
Okay.
We have public defenders that are, some of whom are very good friends of mine, are very good lawyers, that are buckling under the heavy caseloads that they are currently carry. We have a social system that doesn't have substantial enough resources to provide opportunities and programs for people with drug issues, mental health issues. It is not just the courts operating in a vacuum, but it's going to take a multi-jurisdictional or multi-agency approach, if you will, to deal with the problems that are sort of tearing at the fabric of society. We have an increase in homeless population here in the streets in the city and county of Los Angeles who need either drug rehabilitation treatment programs, or that they need mental health options or housing options that we cannot currently provide. But you can't look at those without having some nexus to the criminal justice system. So it's a very complicated issue that needs to be attacked, if you will, and dealt with multi-agency solutions.
What do you think about the new jury pool procedures where you come in and if you don't get picked, you're back out? I've done that a couple of times. I got called for jury, didn't have to stay, but I like the fact that it seemed to streamline that process a lot.
Yes, although, people still complain about getting called in for jury duty, but as I remind my friends and my neighbors who ask me, Deborah, how can I get out of jury duty? I will say, you know what? It beats, our troops are fighting for us in the Middle East and overseas, and this is a great legacy, and it's a privilege to go to jury duty. And, please just step up and do your civic duty and do it proudly, and please stop complaining.
Yeah, I did get called this week for jury
This
duty.
week, okay.
I did. I think it's because I had a change of address, and so I had to, and I decided to register to vote in the new
Right.
place where I'm living, and so
You
I
and
had
about
served in
a
the,
million other people.
Yeah, I had served this last year, but then I was called again in a different district, and so I did put it off because it was happening during a time when it was like my husband's birthday or something. But it is. I think it's important. People are saying, "Oh, don't you want to
No,
get
you
out of it?"
you
And
have to
I
go.
said, "Well, what have I got to do? I can do it."
I think what irritates people is it seems to be an unorganized process, right?
Well, actually, it's gotten much better.
It
And I
has.
will tell you this. There are certain segments of our population that complain about not being able to effectuate change in the system, that they feel that the system is this or that or something else. And I say the best way to try to effectuate change is to sign up and go for jury duty when you get called. You want to be part of the solution, not the problem.
And I don't get out of it anymore.
Yeah, no.
What do you do for a
mean,
living?
I don't think
I do a radio show about security, and I'm pro-police, and I'm an ex-police officer, and I think everybody's guilty. Can you be fair and impartial? Probably not. He's acceptable. I can't get out of it anymore because that's.
Well,
I will be fair, but
I think some of it is like, at least for me, there's this preconceived notion maybe that you're going to get stuck in jury duty for something like an OJ case where it's like for months out of the year.
It's
you're
not
gonna
stuck. It's a privilege, remember.
Yes, it's a privilege.
it's a good point.
And-
So tell us why you think you're a little better than some of your opponents. What's the? I got the whole experience line. That's a good one. That's a great one. So there's some other things we should look at to separate you from your competition.
Well, I am the only woman in the race.
Yay.
I'm the only Latina in the race. I have tremendous endorsements that none of my opponents have, both politically affiliated endorsements, law enforcement endorsements for days, many clubs and associated groups. Obviously, the women's groups are backing my candidacy. But in addition to the depth and breadth of my experience, because like my competitors that I have done the gang cases, the fact that I have been working so actively on women, children, elder issues, I just have a wider depth and breadth of experience. In addition to that, I've raised 2 kids. One is off at college at the University of Chicago. Go Maroons. My son's going to be a senior in high school, and it was really important to my husband and I that we effectively raised, 2 good citizens before I decided to embark on this latest journey. I've been a wife, a mother, a daughter, a sister, a prosecutor, and every day of my life I have made decisions that affect outcomes of other people's lives.
It really is about decision making, isn't it? I
You
think
have to be able to be decisive.
Yeah, and you do get some judges sometimes where I feel they don't want to make a decision. I don't think it's because they don't know the law. The law is pretty easy. You read it in the book and say that applies or doesn't apply.
Well, it's not quite that black and white. It is subject to interpretation.
Right. But you wonder on some of the decisions that we see whether there was something influencing them. It didn't seem like it stuck to the law. But when you're in what you do and you're making those decisions every day for 27 years, to me it's like a no-brainer to say, well, obviously she can make that decision on the bench. It makes sense to me.
Well, I can tell that you don't take anything lightly, and that's so appreciated, right? When you're taking on a case and you're looking at everyone, no matter how many you've tried, it's wonderful to know that somebody is there taking everything very, very seriously, that everything's being presented the way that it is ethical and with a lot of integrity.
You're affecting somebody's life for the rest of their life.
Yeah.
Well,
That decision has to be
absolutely.
right.
And I take that, even as a prosecutor, I have an ethical obligation to also make sure that the defendant gets a fair trial, even though I'm the prosecutor. And I've had many cases where I have had to sort of interject myself into the proceedings just to make sure that the defendant was getting a fair trial. There have been cases where I've had pro per defendants that I would go above and beyond just to make sure that the defendant was getting a fair trial. And I think that this is so important because I realize when I prosecute an individual that I am depriving them potentially of freedom, whether it is a year in the county jail or the rest of their life in prison. I realize that I'm taking this person away from their family, their loved ones, their friends, that they will probably never walk their daughter down the aisle when she gets married. They will not greet their son when he comes back from the Middle East if he's in the services. They will not see their children graduate from high school. They will not be there for Easter, Christmas, or Thanksgiving dinners. I take that obligation and that responsibility very seriously, and I've never been cavalier or reckless because I understand this very, very completely, that I have had a very substantial obligation to keep the public safe, but to also make sure that when I was prosecuting someone who I believed was guilty, that he got a fair trial, and I did everything in my power to, and he or she. I've actually prosecuted women as well for domestic violence, homicide, et cetera, child abuse, having inappropriate relations with their students, et cetera. But
Oh, you got some of those cases.
Oh, yes.
What's up with that? That seems like it's on the rise, isn't it? That's what you hear more of cases.
Yes.
That's very
Well, we're
strange.
hearing more and more about
right.
that.
I think it goes to that spotlight, right? It's that
The 15 minutes
We've
thing.
got that 24-hour news cycle
Yeah.
now. So
So if you're on the bench and you're bringing
Yes.
this huge amount of experience with you,
Yes.
what do you feel your challenge is going to be that's different from the challenges you just talked about? Because some of the things you just talked about are very, very well thought out. I mean, these are serious issues.
Right.
As a judge, are they similar decisions you're going to have to think about, or maybe you're more restricted? I think a DA has a lot of leeway to say, you know what, let's make a deal with you. Let's do this. I think a judge is more rigid, maybe.
I have to sit on the sidelines and let them play ball. That's
Right.
how I see it.
That would be a challenge to you, I would think.
I would think so, but I think that I'm up to that challenge.
I think you are too. I mean, I'm just saying it's different, right? So
Yes.
people might think, oh, well, she's a prosecutor, then she's going to go prosecute from the bench. That's not what it is. It's a different personality.
I don't know if you remember, I don't remember much about the movie Primal Fear with Richard Gere, but I remember him saying way back when in the movie, it's the only line I remember, he said, someone had asked him in the movie about being a judge, and he said, why would I want to sit on the sidelines when I can play ball?
Yeah.
Well, for many years, 25, now 26 years, I've wanted to play ball.
Yeah.
But then I realized at some point that it's not just about me playing ball, that I feel that my professional experience and my life experience, I want to have a broader sphere of influence and impact, if you will, because I realize after working in the system for 25 years, I personally feel that I can help make it a better system. And so I'm willing to give up playing ball so that I can try to effectuate change on a larger scale.
Where do you think justice ultimately, it's a difficult question, where do you think it ultimately rests? Is it in the prosecution, the judge, or the jury? Or all three ultimately is where it should be. But, you know, we see crazy decisions from juries and we go, okay, what went wrong in that process? Where along the lines did somebody not get the right law read to them? Were they influenced by somebody? Most of the time, I think most decisions are proper. I think you might agree with that.
I do.
But you get some crazy ones, and I don't understand how those crazy ones get out the door.
Well, look, we're all human beings, and when you walk into jury duty and we are picking jurors, we have very limited time to interact with them, to really get a feel for their background, to know what biases they may or may not possess. And I believe that we as human beings, we all have biases. And so I think sometimes we do get some unusual results that we can't explain. But I think that when people come into the jury room, I would like to believe by and large they try to set those agendas, differences aside, be them cultural, racial, socioeconomic, whatever, religious, and try to do the right thing. We do get some unusual results at times, but I just think that that's kind of human nature, and that's part of the system. And we just have to accept the system with its flaws.
How much influence does a judge have in steering a case? Because, you know, some cases are political, right? If you get a political case, I'm thinking of, that's got to be a lot of pressure for a judge to handle a political case. Because you can't just follow the law necessarily, depending on who your pressures are. I'm not talking about anything that's crazy, but there's just some subtle influences in that, don't you think?
Well, I think that we've heard about some of those high-profile media cases where we wonder at times why the judge did what the judge did.
Right.
But I've obviously been a party to some of those cases, and I will draw upon that experience and try to use it in a way that I don't feel that I do influence the outcome of a case. It's not my role as a judge. As a prosecutor, it is my job on some level to ethically influence the outcome of a case based on the witnesses I put on, the evidence, and my arguments to the jury. But as a judge, you can't do that. You have to sort of divorce yourself, if you will, other than ruling on the law and the evidence and all and making sentencing decisions. But ultimately, that's for either the prosecutor or the defense to do. I'm not there to argue their case for them or win it or lose it for them.
What does Debra like to do when she's not prosecuting people? What's your fun zone? What do you do?
Well, you know, I'd try cases every night or every day in the office, and I'd go home and try to be a mother to the kids and a wife to my husband. My daughter played travel ball for years, so I was a softball mom. My son has played water polo for many years. I attend to my dad. He's 87. He's in some declining health now, so every night I call my dad at 7:30 after Jeopardy. I go down every weekend and see him on the weekends. So my family has been a real priority for me, making sure that my children got the kind of education that they needed to get where it is that they wanted to go. And I've basically been volunteering in the schools at different youth groups. I lecture to domestic violence organizations on occasion, and I try to put myself out there in the community where whatever resources or life skills I have, people could access them through me if they needed some assistance.
Yeah, anytime something goes boink on the news with security, police, my phone goes, what do you think about that? What do you think about that? What should we do? What should we do?
Well, and in my career, I've made myself available to a lot of police agencies. So I get calls day and night from police friends. Debra, I have a question about this, or what do you think about that? And so I've made myself available. The other thing I've done in my career, which is really unusual and kind of interesting, is I've done almost 100 parole board hearings throughout the state of California.
That's very interesting.
Oh, my goodness.
Where I would go to San Quentin and Folsom and Vacaville, and I would sit in the parole board hearings. I was usually the only woman, and I'd be in there with usually the life inmate and his attorney, and then members of the Board of Prison Terms, where they would be making decisions about whether or not that they felt he was eligible or suitable for parole at that time. And that's been a fascinating experience for me, and I don't believe that anybody in my race has taken the time to involve themselves in these cases the way I have throughout my career.
Yeah, that's very interesting.
Yes.
Did you let anybody go?
Not that I recall. We make recommendations, but ultimately the decision is made at a higher level.
Okay. Debra Archuleta running for Los Angeles County Judge, seat 11 in LA
Yes.
County. Give us your website.
It is archuletaforjudge.com, and I have an email that's debraarchuleta4judge@gmail, and the 4 is the number 4 at gmail.com.
Thanks for coming in, Deborah. I'm going to vote for you. Are you going to vote for it, Tanya?
Thank you. Yeah.
I think so. Yeah. Excellent.
What do they say? Tell a friend?
That's right. Tell a friend.
All right.
Thanks for coming in.
Thank you for
Tune in
having
next
me.
week for another exciting adventure on Security Guy Radio. Good night.